Fantastic. So welcome everybody to the latest Jodale webinar. It's my absolute pleasure to be collaborating this evening with Soundtrap, which is an amazing web-based audio editor. And we have the lovely Jess and Alan from Soundtrap, and also Mark Connolly, who's going to be presenting about Soundtrap live from Massachusetts in the States, which is amazing. Just as per normal, those people that have come along to the session before, as you can see, we are recording the session. So if you want to catch the recording, all you have to do is go to my YouTube channel, which is Jodale 100. Really, really easy to find, and you'll be able to watch the recording back as many times as you need to. It's going to be quite an interactive session tonight, which I can't wait to start. It's going to be fantastic. And I'm really, really delighted that you could all come along today. As those people know me, I absolutely love audio, and I think that audio is a great way in which you can promote listening and speaking skills in the languages classroom. So what we're going to do to start off with is just a couple of house rules. If you have a question, I'd love you to put the questions in the chat. If you put the letter Q in front of your question, it's really simple and easy for me to then collect the questions during the session. I can put them into my then Google Doc, which I've got on my second screen, and I'll be able to then put them to Mark or to Jess or to Alan during the session. So we're going to do the Q&A towards the end in the last section of the session, and there's lots and lots to look forward to. So without further ado, we're going to make a start. And here is today's agenda. As you can see, we're going to start off by looking at what Soundtrap is. Once we've done our introductions, we're all going to talk a little bit about who we are and where we're coming from and our context. We're then going to have Mark showing us some amazing examples of how he's been using Soundtrap in the world languages classroom, as I know you say in the States, with some little snippets for us to listen to. We're then going to do a live recording, so no pressure, and we're going to show you how easy it is to use Soundtrap live in the webinar. And then Alan's going to show us a really exciting project that he did recently with 3 primary schools in Dumfries and Galloway around storytelling, and then we're going to finish off with some next steps and, as I said, some Q&A. So without further ado, we're going to start off with Jess talking a little bit about what Soundtrap is all about. So over to you, Jess.
Thanks. And before I do, I'd love Alan, if you just want to say hello and introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Thanks, Jess, and thanks, Joe. My name's Alan Cameron. I'm an education advisor with Soundtrap. I've been a teacher most of my life, and I just love working with Soundtrap. So I'm looking forward to this webinar this evening. Thanks.
Thanks, Alan. And I'm Jess. I am coming to you live from the States as well with Mark. So I'm really excited to learn from everyone in our international community. And I'm a former world language teacher turned administrator turned Soundtrap education specialist. So really excited to explore ideas with you about how we might bring even more utility and exciting creativity to audio and learning in your classrooms. So that's a little bit about us. I suppose it'd be great to know a little bit more about Soundtrap and where we're exploring today. That's sort of going to be our sandbox when we do our projects. On the next slide, if you don't mind, Joe, I have a couple quick bullet points of things that might be useful to know. Oops, I went out of order, my mistake.
Should I go back?
Yeah, no, Joe, why don't you, we're a friendly space, so why don't you say hello?
Okay, I will say hello. Thanks ever so much. So as you can see, that's me. You probably all know about me already, but I wanted to put on this particular slide, I've been podcasting since 2006. So as I've said already, I'm a big fan of audio and podcasting, and I think that Soundtrap is a really brilliant way in which we can promote creativity in the classroom. We can promote communication and critical thinking and collaboration, and I can't wait for us to hear from Mark talking about how he uses it in his world languages classroom, and as I said, do a live demo. So I'm here absolutely because I love audio, I love podcasting, and I think that this is a really, really genuinely exciting tool. So that's a little bit about me. And now, Mark, do you want to say a little bit about your own context, if that's okay?
Sure thing. Just briefly, thank you to Joe and Jess and Alan for making this happen. I am based in Boston. I live just north of Boston and work just south of Boston. I've been a language teacher for almost 25 years, and I work currently both as a high school Spanish teacher and an instructional technologist. So I was going back to my notes. Soundtrap is something I learned first about not at ISTE 17, I guess it was, and pre-COVID, I was excited about working with my students in this realm. And one of the things that I'll talk about is it really works for every possible setup, whether it's traditional or hybrid or high flex or fully remote. And some of the examples that I'll point to will make you hopefully think about how it works in that context.
Fantastic, lovely, perfect. So let's go on to the next slide, and now we're going to hear from Jess, who's going to run us through what Soundtrap is all about. Over to you, Jess.
So hopefully you got a quick sneak peek when you signed in that we saw our studio playing a live example of some music, but we are generally, more broadly speaking, an audio recording studio. So whether that's podcasting or music making or audio recording, you've landed in a creative space. So whatever that project is that maybe you're thinking about, everything is accessible online through our browser-based studio. So if you have a device that has internet, you can be in the studio, which is a pretty cool thing considering, renting out an actual studio is a pretty costly endeavor. So it's nice to know that you can have your studio sort of on the go with you. We are designed to be COPA, FERPA, and GDPR compliant. So it is a safe space for students to participate in class projects, work together, collaborate, but only within the walled garden or the community that you've established in your EDU account. So if, for example, a student has a cousin in another country or another town and they want to work together, they'll only be able to work with whoever they're with in their school community. So even though they might have a relative with a Soundtrap account, it's by design that they're working within their school group. And lastly, the subscription's pretty fun. I have to say we do have two sides of our platform. We have the freemium side and the EDU side, but the EDU side is designed to be really teacher friendly. So thinking about bulk imports for your rosters, making sure it's super simple to streamline, assignments and get student collaboration up and running. So there's definitely pros and cons and advantages to all the different parts of the studio, but that's sort of the breadth of the work happens in the studio with students. And then for teachers, truly your advantages and your setup and your logistics are taken care of on the EDU side. So really excited to jump in with you. And one cool thing that I hope you're excited to learn more about is our transcription feature, where you can actually transcribe in multiple languages inside the studio. So we'll dig in more, but I'm just leaving that as a little bit of an Easter egg as to where we're headed.
Lovely. That's really exciting. I can't wait for everyone to see how that works live. It's an amazing opportunity, I think, in the languages classroom to be able to work with the transcript option, but I won't let the cat out of the bag at this moment. Okay, so now what we're going to do, without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Mark, who's going to give us some practical examples of how he's been using Soundtrap in the World Languages classroom, so we can get some ideas on how to replicate the same ideas in our own context. And I would really love you to ask lots of questions. So if you're listening and you fancy asking a question, just pop it in the chat and then I can then put that to Mark a bit later on. So without further ado, here's Mark.
Thank you, Joe. So these examples come from, as I said, a bunch of different scenarios. Some pre-COVID, when we're just exploring, some when we went remote in the spring of 2020. This was one of the first tools that I reached for, actually, to connect students to each other more than anything. And that's what I appreciate about it. It's not just pushing audio that I create or working with textbook audio that we can make available other ways. This is a way to, in the classroom setting, in a sort of hybrid setting, in a synchronous or asynchronous way. Joe and I are going to kind of demo it synchronously, but there are ways to use this tool asynchronously. And that was something that I used quite a bit in that spring to practice pronunciation, to work on dialogues that were pre-existing, to have students write their own work and then perform it. And I'll kind of walk through those examples of, so readings of dialogues, readings of prose, and where I said individual group there, a student can perform just to practice a little snippet to improve or track pronunciation. But we can also, some of the examples that I'll point to in a second, I've taken a larger text and split that up so we can create a kind of a class-sourced, crowd-sourced audiobook, which is a lot of fun. One of the things that I'll try and remember too is in that fateful spring of 2020, we ran out of voices for a project that I was supporting in middle school. So my middle school colleague actually called on her dad to finish up the project. So it was something that we couldn't have done otherwise. So that's that. And then I'll kind of finish by talking about ways to use this to think creatively, right? To get students thinking of themselves as podcasters or producers. So you can flip the slide, Joe.
No problem.
So if you saw, as you were coming in, you saw that this is the studio, right? And I think it's based on if you've ever done some audio editing before of tracks, right? That's your player head right there. And Soundtrap has a ton of baked in loops and sounds and effects. In fact, one of the things that I found well, not so recently, but I used to have to go outside to get to free sound, but now free sound has near full integration inside Soundtrap. So if you need restaurant ambiance, if you need a street scene, if you need some kind of next level loops, it's all there, and it's as easy as kind of drag and drop. So this is what a level 2, right? So a high beginner, low intermediate project might look like. My voice is and this was, for context, this was a dialogue, a short dialogue in a restaurant that my students had read, and then we were going to kind of splice it together. So my voice is the top one there. A student contributed. Now, this is when we're remote, they're recording. That's the second track. And then there was a second student and a third student. And that bottom track there is just some restaurant ambience that I found. So what I was able to do in this instance, and Joe will hit play just for a snippet in a second, we recreated a dialogue that we might have performed in class, but kind of next level with some of the ambience. And then it was something that we could make available to everyone. We could make available via our LMS or other places. So this is kind of what a base level project might look like. So maybe hit.
Yep, so hit record,
Sure.
hit play, here we go.
El señor Gómez, su mujer y sus hijos Antonio y Ángela llegan a un restaurante en la Ciudad de México. Se acerca una camarera.
Buenas tardes, señores.
Buenas tardes. Nos gustaría cenar, por favor. Somos 4.
Sí, cómo no, señor. ¿Prefieren una mesa en el restaurante o en la terraza?
Hace mucho calor, vamos a la terraza.
Entonces, por aquí, por favor. Siéntense, señores. Aquí está el menú.
Muchas gracias.
Enseguida vuelvo.
Después de un rato.
Sí, señores. ¿Qué les gustaría tomar?
Nos gustaría el menú turístico de 200 pesos.
Sí, señor. ¿De primer plato?
Mi hijo y yo vamos a tomar una sopa. Y mi mujer y mi hija van a tomar mejillones.
De acuerdo. ¿Y qué quieren para el segundo plato? Les voy a recomendar el lomo de cerdo. Está exquisito.
¿Sí?
You can kind of
lomo
press
de
pause
cerdo
there
para
now,
mí
but
y mi
that's the
mujer.
idea. That's the idea of what it sounds like. Again, those were students in different places, working asynchronously, but we were able to string that together. In preparation for this the other day, I told Jess that one of the first lessons that I learned was my instinct was to have each of those snippets, to each of those pieces of dialogue, be separate audio files. But I very quickly realized that that was not the plan of attack, that it was best to have my students, right? So the student A, student B, student C there record their full presentation with a little bit of a 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000 pause that then I could splice out. It was easier to work on that in post-production than it was in pre-production. So that's example number 1.
Fantastic. Can I just say, I absolutely love that. I absolutely love it. I just think that the atmos you have in the background there, and then the voices, it's just absolutely brilliant, the way in which it really brings that dialogue to life. I just think it's wonderful. Can you maybe just, before we go on to the next example, can you maybe, I know you talked about the tip about recording there, but what would you describe as the setup beforehand? Would you do like the standard scripting with the students. Can you maybe just talk us through the whole process of what you normally do, Mark, when you're putting together this sort of project?
Sure, no, absolutely. And that's something, so if I were to put on my instructional technologist hat, working with some of my language colleagues or colleagues in English or science or history, that's one of the first things that I say is no matter how well you or your students know the tool, or no matter how high-end a microphone you might have, it's all about the quality of the script, right? And the quality of the preparation. So in this instance, it was a kind of a pre-written, this was just a dialogue that comes from a reader that we have. I've done similar projects where either inspired by that or just in place of that, they write an original script, but that's something that I'm laying eyeballs on. We're a Google Apps school, so working and reworking scripts, working and reworking pronunciation, so that when it's time to go into the studio, it's something that has some merit and it's not just flying in there to goof around.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that really comes across. I think the pronunciation, as we could all hear, was really lovely. So well done. It's amazing. So should we go on to the next slide?
Yep.
Fantastic. Let's see some more examples of how we can use Soundtrap in the World Languages classroom. Okay, over to you.
So fast forward to basically now, and this is something that's not fully post-produced, but this is something that my students currently, so we were fully remote and then we were hybrid and working in cohorts. And now, thankfully, we're all back together. But I think Soundtrap and projects like this still have a place. So to set this up, we took a chapter of a reader, again, at kind of low intermediate level. And we said, all right, what if we were able to recreate this chapter with everyone's voice attached, right? There is a audio file that's part of the package, right? So it's input in and then output all around the reading. So what I just said is you're going to take this section of this page and the other section of that page. And if you look at the kind of cascading files there, that's just the end point of a student's presentation, and then where their classmate picks up. And what this is just a screenshot, but if we were in the studio, we'd see some ambient effects and some intros and outros as well. So you can just play maybe a shorter snippet of this one.
Fantastic. Let's have a listen.
En mi habitación me puse a pensar en la foto del museo, porque había reaccionado así. Había visto esa foto muchas veces en compañía de mi abuelo y nunca había sentido nada así. Intenté visualizarla. Un barco grande y largo, muchos hombres mirando la costa, el hombre vestido de blanco mirando la cámara. No comprendí. ¿Por qué me molestaba tanto? Era imposible que el hombre realmente me estuviera observando. Era una foto, por Dios.
Me acerqué a la ventana y miré hacia el Corte Culebra. Vivía con mis padres y mis abuelos paternos en Paraíso, que durante la construcción del canal era un sector del Silver Roll.
So the same idea there, you can hit pause there, but a little bit of a transition, and obviously they're working in the same sandbox, but different sound spaces. So the quality of the audio there is either something that you can work on, or honestly, and this is one of the lessons that I'll try and share, is it's really not about studio quality audio. It's about students sharing their voice.
That's superb. But what would you say, Mark, to say a teacher watching this in the recording or watching live right now about the amount of time that it would take to put this together, and they maybe have a concern, they may be more focused on tech than on the language? What would you say to that?
Well, and that's one of the things that I'll maybe try and stress at the end is Soundtrap allows you to, if you have a 5-minute block, right, you can get quality 5 minutes. If you want this to be a week-long or a 2-week-long project, you can make that work too. So the point of entry for the tech and really the time on the student side and on the teacher side is what you have available, and that should not be a barrier to the point of entry.
Fantastic.
Nor should the available tech, because most of this is I'm working with old school earbuds. Oftentimes students are working just with their laptop and the mic there, So Jess can maybe share a little bit more about that, but that's something that I've found to work. It just works based on what you have, and it doesn't require teachers to have knowledge or hardware that isn't readily available.
Yeah, Mark,
Jess, did you want to say something about that?
I can add to that. And just having the privilege of working with teachers for the last couple of years and seeing them, navigate so many different circumstances and so many different tech setups. I mean, truly, the cool thing is exactly what Mark says, is what the students say when they're in the studio, the quality of their voice and what they're sharing, and the ideas that they're, able to share more widely with their classmates or their teacher is really what matters most. You don't need external fancy Bluetooth mics. You don't need a crazy MIDI keyboard and amazing sound effects synths. You don't need anything like that. You legitimately either just need the phone and you can open the Soundtrap app, or you can jump in on a Chromebook or a laptop, whatever works best for you. So I think exactly what you're saying, Mark, is, we can always teach those post-production or editing skills if we want. That's sort of like an extension activity. But really the red record button is the only thing they need to know how to hit to be able to put something in the studio that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I would add to that, from my experience, that's true. And a project like this and a platform like this, I have in my notes here the performers and the producers, right? So for someone who considers themselves to be a language student, this is just something that we're going to do and involved in our day-to-day, which is great. But there may be a performer out there who sees this as a time to really go all in on the Spanish. On the same side, for those students, and there are more and more of them, right, who are interested in the producing, this is a point of entry to say, wow, I can use these tools or these skills as part of language learning.
Absolutely. And do you find when the students start to record themselves for the first time, there's a sort of like a moment of giggling when they maybe haven't heard their voice before, but then they then get over that and then they start to produce really real quality work? Is that something that you found personally?
It is, and in a way that's maybe different from a one and done performance in classroom. I think students will be patient with themselves to say, oh, I didn't like that one, or I didn't get that word, or get almost all the way through and no, I didn't like the pronunciation there. So the time to listen to themselves and think about the performance is huge.
And presumably that really helps with their pronunciation, the fact that they're listening to their own voice again and again and again, and they want to re-record it and make it as good as they possibly can. It should really not only improve their pronunciation, but also really embed the ideas, let's say, about the dialogue in the example that you showed, really embed those phrases into their minds, so that when they come to then replicate that dialogue, maybe in a written form or in a speaking situation later on, because they've done so much work on it, they'll be able to really remember it so very, very well. And I think that's one of the powerful aspects of working with audio in languages, I think.
Right. Listening to themselves for sure, but listening to their classmates, right? To say, oh, I can improve on that, or just honestly, that's really impressive how my partner or how someone in another group did that.
Yeah, lovely, fantastic. Should we go on to the next slide?
Sure. Which are just some. Yep, absolutely.
Fantastic.
So just some considerations and some questions, many of these that we've teed up already. So an early lesson for a project like this or these or any, right, is scale for the time available, not the tech available. So if this is a 5-minute station rotation or a bell ringer or something that you do occasionally, don't use that as like I said, a barrier to entry. The time or the tech. It's fun to have some next level hardware, but that should not be something that is prohibitive on any front. So that's that. That question there, is this for an audience, right? I said, can you export this to an LMS, export this to a class webpage, share this with the group, share this with a course group, maybe share this with other people in and out of the building? Those are questions that you can ask, and there's a great source of pride there of, hey, that's my voice. How much control? This is a question that teachers always run up against, right? You can have supreme control. I often want to have a little bit of control, but that's more how I'm wired. But allowing students just to say, hey, you go play in the sandbox. You work with the sound effects. You really take care of the post-production. Like I said, you can activate those skills and some of those voices otherwise. Can this be a routine? Every chapter, every week, every month, right? You create some content, whether, like I said, it's original. Some of the examples here that I've given are lower intermediate, but in some of my upper level classes, it's been original content. So like we're going to do with the demo, an interview, a podcast, a reflection, so things like that. And then that last one, I think we've touched on already.
Absolutely, that's amazing. So should we go to the live demo now? Is that okay?
Without a net.
not that I'm worried at all about this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come out to the presentation and now show everyone the live demo. So do you want to just talk us through how easy it is to start a collaborative session, Mark? And Mark very kindly is going to sort of hold my hand and walk me through what it is that we need to do.
Sure thing. So this you'll recognize from when we all started the session, and then some of my screenshots. But there's a top track that is an intro, a question 1, and then later on a question 2 that I've pre-loaded. Right. So this could be earlier in the day. This could be at any time beforehand. I have a little bit. That third track is an intro that I pulled right from the Soundtrap library. That last strand there is just some looping effects, some ambient audio in the background. So the framework here is this is more of an interview, a podcast that can work. So what Joe is going to do is kind of take this framework, right? Take this template and then kind of drop his responses in to see how a student or how a colleague might interact in this space.
Fantastic. So this could be done live. We could be both talking together, having an interview, but what you've done here is you've set up this template. So you could have, let's say, instead of just having 2 questions here, we've got a question here and a question here, you could have, say, 10 questions, and then the idea would then be that the students would listen to the different questions and then put their answers in, and then we can always move the audio around a little bit if we go over it and what have you, which we'll show. Right,
or you could split the difference. You could have a couple of kind of guaranteed questions, and then depending on how the conversation went, play out. So kind of the synchronous, asynchronous together.
Fantastic. So everyone watching this right now, you've got the project open. All you'd have to do is click on the icon with the 2 heads next to it to share the link with your interviewee, if that's how you wanted to set it up, and then you can both then either record together, or as in this example, we can have the pre-recorded audio and then I can record it live. I think I'm just waffling because I'm a bit nervous about hitting record, but it's all good. And also here you'll see that the letter R is highlighted. That's because by enabling that option, it means that I'll be able to listen to the audio. You'll all be able to listen to the audio of the music here, the loop, and then Mark's questions. But when I record, I'll just have my track recorded here, and it won't interfere with any of the other tracks. So that's obviously really important. That's why I've got the R selected here. So now all I have to do is hit record, and we'll have a listen to the questions, and then I'll try and sound reasonably coherent. Here we go.
Hello there and welcome to our demo. We're going to show you how easy it is to combine pre-recorded and live audio inside Soundtrap for your own projects. Here we go. Hey Joe, welcome and thanks for being part of this live demo. The first question is, what do you think teachers need to know as they start exploring with Soundtrap in their classes?
Well, great question, Mark. Thanks ever so much. I think what teachers need to know when using Soundtrap is to see how easy and simple it is. And I also think it's really important to think about how Soundtrap can promote all 4 C's. In other words, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. And to me, this is all about creativity and bringing the language to life. I think we've got another question coming up. Let's have a listen.
Beyond scripted readings or interviews like this, what do you think are some other ways that teachers could integrate Soundtrap into their courses?
Okay, well, I would say that having scripted dialogues and so on and so forth in the languages classroom is a great idea, and I think that Soundtrap can really bring that language learning to life and make it really interesting and promote the creativity of the students. But other ways in which we could use this as well, I think for practicing phonics and pronunciation, I think that could also be really, really useful. I think that the students could maybe choose some words they find difficult to pronounce, and they could practice in Soundtrap again and again and again until they can improve their pronunciation, or the teacher could record some model pronunciation practice, and then the students could then practice and practice and practice at home, at school, wherever they are, as long as they've got either the web browser or the app. Away we go. Phew, I think I did it.
as a first pass, that's amazing. And you're kind of threading the needles on timings. One of the really great points here is that if that had worked, great. If you wanted to extend that first response and slide my question, it's as simple. This is a super easy interface where once you have audio recorded there, and maybe, you can just take that and slide it left and right. You can toggle the volumes over on the menu panel on the left there. So you don't need to get this exactly right the first time. And exactly what you said is a little bit of rehearsal. Maybe some you could potentially take your extended track now and split that and splice it out so either your timings are right, or you could this is some of the most fun, you can splice it and take a later response or part of another response and bring it in.
Fantastic. Should we maybe just show people how easy it is to make a split, or how to do a little edit? Is that okay? I know I'm so relieved I got it bang on. That's great.
So
but let's say,
and Jess, you can guide us here, but if you take the kind of player head over, you'll just go into edit and then splice, right? Or
right. So
split.
if I want to put, say, these put it here, say, and then I select the track, and then I click. It's not edit, is it? It's
You can right click, Joe.
Right click.
I didn't try that.
There you go. Right click, and then split region.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and now as you can see, I can now move that along. Exactly what Mark was just saying. So really, really simple, and I can always just undo. By clicking here, there we are. So it's in lots of ways, it's like a Google Doc, but using audio in Soundtrap. So all the things you would normally say, normally have, you've got the cut, you've got the paste, you've got the undo. It's very similar. It's just instead of words, you're working with audio. And then another idea you can do, if I move to the bottom right of the track, as you can see, it says adjust end, and I can move this here as well. So you can it's what's called non-destructive editing. Fantastic. Any other things you'd like us to go through, Mark, at this point, or things that you normally do when you're putting together a project?
No, I think this is a good moment to transition, and then if it comes up in one of the questions, we can take a deeper dive into some of the editing functions.
Fantastic, lovely. Okay. So, Wolf, I'm so relieved. Let's go back to the presentation and go back to slideshow. There we are. And if you do have any questions, everyone, please put them in the chat. If there's anything you want us to show, that would be absolutely fantastic. And now we will come back to Mark in a moment. But now, if it's okay, I would love Alan to talk a little bit about how he's taken Soundtrap to the next level, if you like. In a more advanced context around storytelling in a Scottish context, and I think this is absolutely fascinating to hear how he's really been able to enhance the creativity of the children by using Soundtrap and storytelling. So over to you, Alan, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about your fantastic project.
Oh, thank you very much, Joe. And if you're ever looking for a career as a DJ, I think you've already nailed that one. Mark's comment, threading the needle, was spot on with that. Well done. And well done, Mark, with your brilliant work. Enjoyed listening to all that stuff. Absolutely fantastic. I've had the privilege and pleasure of working with 3 schools in Scotland. Southwest Scotland, Dumfries and Galloway is the region, and the specific area is called Stranraer. And there's a group of 3 schools, And these schools are Leswalt, Kirkham and Portpatrick. And these three schools are all managed by the same head teacher, but it's three distinct schools. So this storytelling in the studio project, they get the opportunity to work with Scotland's National Centre for Children's Literature and Storytelling, which is called Moat Bray in Dumfries. The project was entitled Our Enchanted Lands. And pupils in composite classes, now that's classes of young people, it's very small schools these, where you've got 2 classes in the whole school, and the senior class is primary 4 to 7, aged 8 to 11. So they're all composite, different ages and stages, but all working together in the same class over 3 different schools. And they created their own short stories using their own voices and using some music that they can get in Soundtrap. And some fantastic sound effects. So I'm going to share my screen and share a sway with, let me see, continue, and share sound and share. Here we go. All right, so we can see the Enchanted Land project. Now, a big shout to Mandy Warlow, teacher in Portpatrick Primary, who has given us permission to use her Sway project, which really shares with us how the whole thing came together. I'm going to share the link after this little talk. I'm going to share the link and you can look at it at your leisure. So she's put this together and she's saying that our primary 4 to 7 pupils were asked to produce a short story about their own imagined enchanted land. And so they were tasked with using and applying a wide range of skills, writing and recording their stories using voice, sound effects, and music. And they achieved the mechanics of doing this with Soundtrap. So then she goes on to say the skills for life learning and work were developed through collaborative working, and the boys and girls were required to cooperate, negotiate, share thinking, and it was just the most fantastic project. Now, that was the challenge. I'm going to play 1 or 2 little examples here in a moment, but just let me show you some pictures, because sometimes pictures tell a bigger story than anything else. That's the young people making their podcasts. As I say, these young people are only 8, 9, 10, 11 years of age. Absolutely fantastic work. There's the project on the board in the classroom. So it could be shared by the teacher or indeed pupil-led from the board. Examples, try out a whole class project together and then go back and do individual or paired work. So lots to read here, building on experience, lots of pictures, again, of the young people who are clearly engaged and loving it. When the bell goes, they just don't want to stop. There they are working with the scripts that they've prepared. The dark shaded out bit is, I think, the boys' text, and the girl was reading the other text. So they've marked out the different bits of text like that. So quite a lot of planning, preparation, and good teaching to make all these things happen and come together. So the next thing is the teacher highlighted that these kids were so motivated, and I'm just going to have a look at the bottom paragraph there. The technology used gave an effective platform for self-evaluation and real-time feedback. It also supported learning for children with additional support needs. And the options of, there's the transcription mentioned there and the playback functions. So there's more pictures of the young people with big smiles on their faces. And then they even made, after they'd done all the story podcasts, they even made a reflection on the whole project. And the children produced a podcast to share their views on how this project supported their learning and development. So you could have a listen to that at your leisure when I post the link later. So let's jump back and hear little clips of examples, because we want to hear a little bit of that. So the first one is The Extraordinary Tale of Etheria, and you'll hear a lovely wee piece of music they've put on at the front, and I'll just let you hear 40 seconds of this.
The Extraordinary Tale of Etheria. The Extraordinary Tale of Etheria begins with 2 normal girls, called Chloe and Jenna. Both in high school, Chloe had hazel brown eyes and curly hair reaching down to her shoulders. Jenna's eyes were sapphire blue and she had black short hair. One day, Chloe and Jenna's school were on a school trip to the lake.
Remember, take notes about the lake, and I want you all back here in half an hour,
the teacher said. Chloe and Jenna set off around the lake. Wow, this place looks magical.
So there we are, and it's magical with all the birds song, and in the sound effects you've got a choice of about 30 or 40 bird song clips. It's absolutely fantastic the way they can work with that. Next one, Mysterious Moon Mystery, and here there's a little glockenspiel at the front, a digital glockenspiel. You could change the sound to maybe a marimba or a piano or a steel pan or anything you like, but they've used a glockenspiel sound, and there's a lovely sound effect. You'll hear a water splash, splosh, and some heavy breathing. Here we go.
As she waded through the cool, blue, crystal-like water, she felt someone or something tap her on her shoulder. She turned around. Nobody was there.
Suddenly, she was lifted straight off her feet and into the water.
1 minute she was completely balanced. The next, she was flailing about in the water, struggling to get her breath.
So the sound effects now, as Mark demonstrated a minute ago, it's very easy to move those sound effects just into the exact position you want them to be in. You can fade them in, you can fade them out, you can cut them in half, you can manipulate them, you can put echoes on them, you can turn the young people's voices into space monsters or a telephone voice or all sorts of things. It's absolutely fantastic fun. And very, very briefly, just a tiny little bit of The Thing.
Thing by Aidan Adams and Malcolm McGregor. It was a cold, dark night. Will woke up at 3 a.m.
So there you go. Now, just to finish off looking at this Sway by Mandy, we'll jump down to they're able to share their achievement. And I think it's fantastic. They can reflect on their learning. They can share their achievements, and the top little bit of the paragraph, the children's accomplishments were shared with their family community through each of the 3 schools' blogs. And this project was showcased at Dumfries and Galloway's STEM conference as an example of good practice. So there's so many ways to flag up the work of the school, to make the parents proud, the community proud, and they even had a Radio Wendy appearance which links into the Peter Pan story, which has been broadcast on Facebook. And lastly, I'll just let you see each of the kids, the P4 to 7 kids in Liswalt, P4 in Portpatrick, and that's the sea, and Ireland is just way beyond that. You can see Ireland from their school, and that is Kirkham School. So there you go. I'm just going to stop sharing and say it's just been such a privilege and a pleasure. And the application of modern languages is really that if they can tell a story, a 3-minute podcast story in English or Scots or Gaelic or whatever, they can do it in any language. And that's the exciting thing. So I'll pass you back, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan. That was absolutely inspiring, and it just shows what can be produced. It's brilliant. It's lovely to have a whole range of different examples of how Soundtrap can be used in the languages classroom, and in your case for English as an L1, and in Mark's case, Spanish as an L2. Absolutely brilliant, really, really inspiring. And we've had a couple of lovely questions as well. Keep the questions coming, everyone. That'd be great. So I would now share my screen again, and there we are. So we'll go back to here and share sound and click share. There we are. So that was.
If I can just add one kind of layer on top of that, and Alan, that's a great example. We kind of did it live here. Is once the audio is to your specifications, you can share that out either as an audio file and have it work that way. You can use it inside Google Slides as we're doing here live. It could be part of a Sway. It can be part of all kinds of other tools. So the ways to layer audio on top of other content is really a plus here, and it's super easy with Soundtrap.
Absolutely. So the point there, Mark, is you're right. You can import an MP3 file very, very easily, but I didn't say that you could save it as an MP3 and then fire it to your mum and dad back home. Yeah.
That's lovely. And I love the way in which with Sway, for example, when you upload the MP3, it automatically becomes a player within the tool, which would work in a sort of a Microsoft environment. If people watching this are working in a Microsoft environment, I'm sure they know about Sway, but that's a really nice feature, how you can upload the MP3 and it creates a player automatically. Likewise, as Mark said, with Google Slides, you can embed audio into Google Slides really easily. You just put it into Drive, and then in your Google Slides presentation, click on the Insert Audio option, select the audio. You have to make sure that you make it available to anyone in your organization, so that people can listen to it, and it keeps it nice and safe, and then it just embeds with its own little loudspeaker icon, as we saw with the examples that Mark was playing us earlier. That's exactly what he did. He embedded the audio in that way. So it's really simple once you've got your audio to share it and have multimedia images with it as well. I love those images there, Alan, of the children showing how much they were getting engaged by using Soundtrap in that way. It's absolutely fabulous stuff. Brilliant. Okay.
And Jess, maybe you can say one thing about this, but one of the things I like about Soundtrap even more than Drive with Slides is it accepts all kinds of audio files, right? So whether it's an MP3 or an M4A or a WAV, it just works. So whatever device students are exporting from, and certainly if they're working inside the studio, you don't really need to worry too much, if at all, about file conversion or file compatibility.
Exactly.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, and that certainly wasn't the case a few years ago with compatibility around audio. So that's so nice to hear in a bring your own device context. Were you going to say something, Jess?
Yeah, Joe. I mean, I think the other thing too that Mark maybe has occurred for you is over the course of time you've used Soundtrap more and more, so maybe you record directly into Soundtrap. But for a teacher who's brand new, I'm sure you've got a plethora of recordings or things that maybe you've used for past either formative assessments or summative practice, or I think Jerome mentioned doing like some comprehension, some listening comprehension exercises. So you might have some things already that you don't want to necessarily reinvent the wheel with. Great, just drag and drop it into the studio, because all of those things, like Mark said, can work. So if you have old archive projects or things that have been successful in the past, just bring it on over into Soundtrap, and then you can just build from there. But yeah, you don't have to start all the way over from scratch.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion. And then add some background sound. I love the background sound Mark had in his recording. Absolutely. And just revitalize things, bring them to life. That's absolutely fabulous. Lovely. Okay, let's carry on, if that's okay with everyone. So do you want to talk us through the code here and the trial, Jess? And then I think what we all want to do is have a look at the transcription option
Sure.
in different languages, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. So if today was exciting for you, or you felt a little bit inspired to explore more and see what Soundtrap could look like, we want to make sure that's possible for you, especially in sort of this second half of the school year, and making sure that students have a lot of fun and creativity before heading out for the summer. So that being said, we are extending we typically have a 30-day trial, but we're going to extend it to 90 days for anyone who's attended our session today. So the link is hyperlinked in the slideshow, but I'm going to put it in our chat here. And if you go ahead and create a Soundtrap account, you can then actually redeem this code, World 2022, and you can go ahead and it'll convert your standard 30-day trial into a 90-day trial, so you can work with students over the next couple months.
Superb. Okay, so let's come out of the presentation, and then if we go back to Soundtrap, and then can you talk us through, Jess, how the transcription in different languages works? So do you want me to start, for example, a new project?
No, let's stay where we are. This is perfect.
Okay.
So there are two things you can do to enhance student supports, both from visual learning, but also from just better passive vocabulary practice. So Joe, the one thing that you could do if you wanted to start with some of your more intermediate or advanced users is you could actually put the studio into Spanish. So, or whatever language you're learning. So, I had a teacher once tell me that the best thing I could do was convert every tech device I had into the language I was trying to learn, because it's just really good passive practice that you just internalize over time. So one way to do that, Joe, would be to go to the top toolbar, and if you hover over settings, you'll see the option to go to language. And so in this case, we have done an English project. So your demo with Mark has been done in English. So we're going to stay in English. But if you wanted to have the transcript in another language, say you're practicing Spanish or Italian or Polish, whatever language you're learning, you would go ahead and turn the studio on into this language, and it would transcribe in whatever language you choose. You can actually do multilingual projects. So if you have a polyglot and you have someone who's really phenomenally skilled and you want to have multiple language in a studio, you just toggle back and forth to whatever you want to transcribe. So in this case, we'll keep it in English, but that's one way to go ahead and get started. Now, the second thing we were going to talk about is the transcript itself. So this is a feature available on every project. This is not like a upper tier or a paid feature. It's available to everyone. In the bottom left-hand corner, you should see a little icon that says transcript. Go ahead and click that for me. And you can see here that it actually transcribed as you went. Now, you might want to edit things, right? Sometimes it'll catch a word, or maybe you had a pronunciation that was a little bit inaccurate. We can always go ahead and edit that. But Joe, do me a favor, and if you take that playhead in the studio and you drag it back to the beginning of the track, you might have gotten a quick flash, but just play a little bit for me, and we can actually see that it'll follow the text with the audio. So let's listen here.
Hello there, and welcome to our demo. We're going to show you how easy it is to combine pre-recorded and live audio inside Soundtrap for your own projects.
Okay, so pause here for me, Joe. Now, in this case, it picked up soundtrack instead of soundtrap, the proper noun. So what you can do is if you click or highlight on soundtrack, and hit the letter E on your keyboard, E for edit, you can actually go ahead and fix the word, whether it's, punctuation or spelling, whatever that might be. And so it's actually edited here.
I love that. I absolutely love that. That's brilliant. And just imagine everyone being able to do that in the target language. Absolutely superb.
Or you could, this just occurs to me live, but you could actually kind of flip the script and have students do their own editing, right? To kind of have a script, maybe go in, edit it incorrectly, so that they have to listen carefully and understand the correspondence between sound and spelling. So you could actually use this again, not just as a post-production tool to share out. You can use it as a sandbox.
Amazing.
I think that's a great idea. Would it be an idea to create a new project and for me to speak a little bit of French and see how the transcription works in French? Would that be possible?
Please, that'd be great.
I think that'd be great. So presumably, I'm just presuming here it's file and then new.
And so
then
Joe,
we'll click.
Exactly. Go ahead and save
yes.
it. And I saw a couple notes in the chat that people were having trouble with the link I shared. I'm going to go ahead and refresh that for you. There's a couple links. So I just want to make sure you have the right one. So let me fix that for you.
Fantastic. Now this comes up and we want to click on podcast at this point, don't we? If we're just focusing on the audio with a bit of sound effects and what have you, if you were, say, a music teacher listening to this, then you'd click on music. But for language teachers, we want to click on the podcast option. That's fine. That's fantastic. And then we'll then click on add new track. And then this is really straightforward. So for us, we want to start off with the voices and microphones. You can add other things as well. But for now, we're just going to click on this option here. And then if we click on voice, I think I'm right in saying there are lots of different voices that you can choose.
Lots of different microphone changes or sound effects if you'd like. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, but for the point of this little demo, we'll just stick with voice. And so once we've done that, all I have to do is click the little X there. I need to make sure I've chosen the right microphone, which is fine. That's all good. And if you're just using a laptop, you could use your inbuilt microphone. You don't have to have a fancy microphone if you don't want to. Were you going to say something then, Jess?
Joe, I just want you to switch it over into French so it'll pick up on your French.
Of course. Yeah. So let me click. Absolutely. So then we click on settings, language, as Jess brilliantly just said, and then I'm going to click on français, and then so I need to click yes first of all. It's saving the project, so you have to save the project first. As you can see, it's now saying chargement, which, as we all know, means loading. And in a moment, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that we'll get the interface in French, and then I'll be able to then record speaking in French, and it will allow me to make that transcription. So we're just waiting for that to happen, and I'm hoping that will change very quickly, and so you'll be able to see how easy it is for you to make a transcript automatically. Right, I think would you say I should try and refresh the page, Jess? What do you think?
Yeah, sometimes when you're on Zoom and using a larger bandwidth for a webinar, it can be a little bit slower, but you can definitely give it a quick refresh.
Let's give it a quick refresh and just see if that makes a difference.
Okay, great, thanks.
That's all. Oh, there we are. It's worked. Okay, so now I'm just going to close that now, and I want to go back to here, I think. I click on the studio option. There we are. And that should, there we are, perfect. Okay, so now I'm good to go. I need to enable my microphone. As you can all see, everything's now in French, which is brilliant. And I'm now going to speak in French. I'm going to tell you all about going to the cinema last weekend. Here we go, in French. Here we go. So, le week-end dernier, je suis allé au cinéma pour voir le dernier film de James Bond. C'était super. Après, je suis allé au restaurant pour manger une grande pizza italienne avec mon ami Bob. Quel weekend! Okay, so I just talked about going to the cinema with my friend Bob, having a pizza, and there we are. Okay, so having generated this this bit of audio, we now want to find out how to make the transcript. So as we can remember, you click on the icon here. In French, it's transcription. So we click on this. I think it probably, well, let's just see. It might take a little bit of time for it to render. So I'm presuming right now it's probably actually rendering it still. Is that right? Would you say, Jess?
Well, Joe, you need to go ahead and select which track you want to actually transcribe.
Okay, so let's click on this. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so then we click on it. So as we can all see, it says select the voice track. So then I click here and I click transcrire, which is transcribe.
Yeah.
And now it will save the project, and it will then, that's fine. I then click confirm. And let's have a quick look. Have I done that correctly? Let me. Oh no, it's doing it now. As we can say, yeah. So it's now. It doesn't do it automatically. It takes a little bit of time for it to transcribe, which is completely understandable. So in a moment, we'll be able to see the transcript. While we're doing that, oh no, it has worked. So let's see how accurate this is. Oh wow, I'm very impressed. It's got the dash between the K and the E. Sometimes when you get transcription in other tools, you don't get that. So that's wonderful. Let's have a quick look. So that's absolutely perfect, isn't it? Wow, amazing. I wonder if it's a female voice, if they add an E on the end of LE. We'd have to test that out. I can see Jérôme, who's a French native speaker in the chat, is saying brilliant. So that's fantastic. Have I missed anything, Alan?
I was going to say press play and we'll hear your dulcet tones.
Okay, let's press play. Here we go. So, le week-end dernier, je suis allé au cinéma pour voir le dernier film de James Bond. C'était super. Après, je suis allé au restaurant pour manger une grande pizza italienne avec mon ami Bob. Quel weekend! There we are. So if I was female, obviously with my deep dulcet tones, I'm obviously not female, but if I was, I could presumably then just go here. There we are, and I could then add an E on the end. Oh, I have to press the letter E, wasn't it? Is that right, Jess?
Mm-hmm. E for edit.
So I press the letter E. And I should now be able to, hang on, let's do that again.
Yeah, it should be that light purple.
There we are,
yep.
there we are, there we are. Then there we are. So that's what you could do if it didn't pick it up. I'd love to know, actually. You have to test it out. Those people watching right now, you'll have to test it out, see whether if you have a female voice, if it adds an E on the end. If not, you can just quickly go through the transcription. That was wonderful. Wow. Fantastic. Okay.
To kind of backtrack to something that I thought of, and I hadn't really thought of this until just now, but that level of listening for detail of not just the macro of kind of what's the weekend plan or what's the conversation, but really zooming in and saying, how do the fundamentals, how do the mechanics of the language help us make our point coherently? So that idea of the big and the more granular are a way to leverage this.
Lovely, fantastic. I've seen, by the way, Jess, that my copy and paste isn't working in the chat. So could you maybe copy that last question? I've got the previous question, that last question, and put that in our Google Doc, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. Thanks ever so much. Wow, I'm really impressed. That's brilliant. So let's finish up now with a couple of questions. We really appreciate your questions. If you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. So now we've come to the Q&A part. So to start us off, we've had a really, really great question around about a non-techie teacher watching this. So I'll read out the whole question, which is: listening attentively, storytelling is fab, wondering about the non-techie teacher, how easy is it to create? Hopefully we've shown this already in a way, but say, Mark, if I put that question to you, what would you say to the non-techie teacher watching this thinking, I can't possibly do this is way too techie for me? What would you say to that teacher?
Well, I guess I'd say two things: that we kind of demoed it here in the point of entry and the interface, make it super easy. And you do not have to be the executive producer of these projects, right? Students have a lot of these skills, are interested in developing some of these skills. So in a way that is appropriate, right? Given all the compliance, that I think it's fair to say you be the executive producer. And that's a way to activate not only language skills, but other skills as well. So,
yeah, absolutely. Promoting autonomy and giving children responsibility. And yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Jess, any other thoughts on that to a non-techie teacher watching this demo?
Yeah, I wasn't a techie teacher myself. I wasn't super proficient in every tech tool because we know the vast amount of options that we all have. So it's never going to be possible to be proficient or extremely proficient in every single one to the same degree. But one thing I love about the studio, as opposed to an actual in-person studio, is you can't break it. I mean, there's truly nothing you can press or move or toggle that you can't undo. So if you have a little bit of nervousness or hesitation or a little bit of reservation about starting something new and maybe aren't sure how to navigate it, we do have some additional tutorials, short videos on YouTube, or you can take our certified teacher course, which is about a 45-minute to an hour-long self-guided course if you want to become more proficient. But all that is to say, even if you're just going to go ahead and go into the studio and press all the buttons, if you do that a couple times, you're going to get, I think, more intuitive practice than maybe you even realize. So totally understand the apprehension about getting started, but just know that there's nothing you can't fix in the studio should you want to go back and edit or change it.
Yeah, I love that. You can't break anything with Soundtrap. That's such a great thing to say. Absolutely fantastic. We've had a bit of a techie question from Farida, which is: do students have their own login? And can Soundtrap be used as prep at home to practice speaking tasks? Jess, could I ask you to answer that first, and then Mark, from your experience, if that's okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So every student will have their own login. They have what's called a seat. So teachers and students all have a seat in the account, and they can access it anytime. So absolutely, some of the best things that we've seen come through, and some shining examples, if not a performative or like a final project, are just students monitoring fluency or practices. They've almost made like an audio journal where they've gone through and had like a bi-weekly practice round, or they read the same text over time. I mean, it could be something as simple as that. Or it could be that they're, writing a complex story like Alan's students were doing, and maybe the goal is then the following week, they write the baseline story the first week, and then the second week they go back in and add descriptive adjectives. And so they can always come back and add more to it. So yeah, I think that's a great way to do it, actually. Of course, it can be done in real time in the classroom, but I'm sure Mark can share, having taught in all the different contexts of where students are living and breathing in all these different spaces, there's no kind of right or wrong way to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, perfect introduction there. What else would you add to what Jess has just said in your own examples?
Well, I would underscore the performative, right? The reflective. There can be projects that happen in Soundtrap or outside Soundtrap where this is the final mode of reflection. I've always been fascinated by the kind of iterative nature of maybe take the same text, Jess, which you said is a good example, and track your pronunciation over the semester, over the year, or take increasingly complex texts and see how you can take those on. Another thing that I've been kind of fascinated by is taking an audio recording, whether teacher or professional, bring that into Soundtrap and kind of remixing it, deconstructing it. So you're kind of doing some audio annotation, or you're pausing a text and giving a little bit of a textual analysis. So there's ways to take some of the skills that we just demonstrated and have students working with audio inside. So there really are before, during, and after tasks where Soundtrap can fit.
Yeah, that's superb. That's loving it. It's brilliant. Another sort of more techie question from one of our attendees. Is it okay to share the code with our high school language teacher? I'm currently taking intensive Italian and think they would love using this tool. Jess, what would you say to that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it'd be really fun to see if you two can find a way to do a project together. I mean, maybe there's a cool collaboration option that's lingering or sort of developing here. But yes, absolutely. Feel free to share that with your colleague. That's a great idea.
Lovely. I think we've covered all the questions so far. Let me just double check. If you do have any other questions for the team, feel free to put them in the chat right now. But I think I'm right in saying that we have covered everything. Do you want to maybe just quickly, Jess, before we wrap up, to just go through the differences between the EDU account and the sort of the pricing, and then the standard account, if that's okay?
Sure. So the freemium account is the consumer adult space that we have available to any and all creators. So that is a space and a place where people use, to record professional podcasts or to do professional music work that they're building for their own albums or whatever it is that they're creating. And that space and place is intended for those that are over 18 because they do have the ability to share their projects widely or find a collaborator within the Soundtrap network. So maybe they are looking to work with someone, who's super proficient at bass and they're a fantastic guitarist, but they just don't have a bass player. They can work together that way. But in the case with EDU, we do intentionally design it so that students only work within that interior space of their school community. So that's sort of the major difference. The studio itself is the same. What the adults see in the creative space in the studio is exactly what the students see. So there's truly no difference. I mean, that's great pre-professional training that these are things being used at the adult level, but students are getting the same access just in that restricted safe space. As far as the pricing goes, it does follow the pricing model is per seat. So there's not a specific rate at which we work with in the sense that 50 seat minimum would be the baseline for a subscription. And then you can build that out for as much time as you'd like. So I know a lot of world language teachers have many students, right? Because you see so many classes typically. So I think 50 would probably be a low minimum for you. I'm sure you have many more than that. But that is our baseline to start a class account. And so feel free, I can drop the link in the chat if you want to explore that a little bit more, and we can give you some additional info there.
Fantastic. It's been a wonderful webinar. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to the team. Thank you to our attendees asking those fantastic questions. So just as a reminder to everyone, we are recording the session. I am going to upload it onto my YouTube channel, which is available at JoeDale100, so you'll be able to watch it back. Feel free to share the recording with whoever may be interested in exploring how they can use Soundtrap in the World Languages classroom, or I'm sure if you have colleagues in other subjects who would like to explore Soundtrap as well, then feel free to share the recording with them as well. Are there any next steps we want to talk to people about, Jess? If I go on to the next slide, I think I'm right in saying no. So we're going to that was the last point. But were there any other points you wanted to sum up with, Jess, to our attendees right now?
No next step. Just go ahead and create an account. And obviously, we'd love to see and celebrate some of your projects like Alan and Mark's. I mean, how fun would it be to share your projects with a wider audience during our next session? So please feel free to reach out. I'll drop my email in the chat as well. So you can always share projects with us or join our private Facebook group where we have teachers from around the world sharing project ideas all year round. So feel free to jump in there, and we can't wait to see what you create. I think it'll just be a fantastic creative space, and both for you and for your students. So we're looking forward to seeing what comes next.
That's absolutely superb. So again, a huge thank you to Jess, to Alan for your time from the Soundtrap team. Thank you to Mark for showing all those wonderful examples of how he's using Soundtrap in his world languages class. This has been a lot of fun, and I really hope that people have been inspired by how easy and simple and straightforward it is to use audio creatively to enhance language learning. It's been a really, really wonderful experience. So thank you to everybody. Thank you to the attendees. Thank you to the team. And we're going to stop the session right now. But don't forget, in a few hours' time, you'll be able to watch it back, share it with your friends, etc. And we would really encourage you to take on board the 90-day trial, the generous 90-day trial. Try it out, see what you think, and go from there. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming along. And let's stop recording right now.